Well, I have the privilege of introducing first Chef Spike Mendelson, who you may know. He opened the first Good Stuff Eatery in Washington, D.C. in 2008. He has since opened We the Pizza and is actually planning to open a new taqueria in town called Santa Rosa, which I'm really excited about. I hear it has an Avo bar, so look out for that. He's an advocate for good food policy, including curbing food waste to feed hungry mouths and help the environment, and the need for accessible and healthy school lunches nationwide. He's actually also appointed the chairman of the DC Food Policy Council in 2015. He's a chef ambassador to CARE International and a chef contributor to the DC Central Kitchen. So welcome, Spike. Cool. Hey. Hey, how's it going? Good. So let's see, we're gonna have you first.
Me? Oh. Hi, everybody. How's it going? Are we bringing Brett out too, or?
That's what I was thinking.
Okay.
Okay. Now I'll introduce Brett.
I'm very happy to be here. Excited. I can't see anybody, but.
My bad. Brett Schulman is the CEO of Cava Group, a rapidly growing Mediterranean culinary brand that many of us DC people love, with more than 29 fast casual restaurants and growing. He's previously spent more than a decade in the investment banking world before merging his culinary interests and business acumen as the COO of healthful snack company Snickety. He's a member of the Society of Fellows at the Culinary Institute of America, and he helps promote the missions of organizations like City Blossoms and the Garden School Foundation. Welcome, Brett. Okay, now we have a complete triad. Thank you. Excellent. So we wanted to start by having Spike go over a little bit of your history and your relationship with food waste. When did you decide this was a big issue for you? And what are some creative ways that you're tackling it?
Sure. I mean, a couple years ago, I was inspired by the Chef Action Network, which was pretty much a boot camp, taking chefs and kind of schooling them on how they can be really great voices in the communities, and not only locally, but nationally and internationally, if you'd like. And they kind of really gave you the inspiration to sit back and be like, you know what, I'm around this all day, and you're right, I do have a voice in my community, I can partake, and essentially chefs, what we do for a living is we buy food, we have a relationship with farmers, we know where that food comes from, we accept the food, we have to accept it responsibly, we have to wash it, we have to clean it, we have to store it responsibly, and we have to prepare it in a responsible way as well and feed it to you. So when you think of that, our whole thing is about limiting food waste in our own businesses. So for me, it was really easily to translate that into, in other spaces. Food waste is something that's super important. It's very important to me succeeding in my businesses, but there's not only that part. So that's kind of what gave me the start, and kind of reaching out to the community, seeing all the food waste that was happening. I think the number was 40% of our food waste, that we waste 40% of our food, and I thought that's kind of just crazy, really, right? When you spend so much money and time to produce all this great food, the fact that it just, it gets wasted was something that struck a chord with me being a chef. So it's kind of what gave me the initial, inspiration for it.
And now also as head of the DC Food Policy.
Yeah, now as head of the DC Food Policy, after boot camp and after coming back to DC and seeing what I could do, we were talking with Mayor Muriel Bowser, and we had this piece of legislation that was just sitting there to kind of form a food policy council, which I chair. And pretty much, what we do is we're a legislative arm to push forward good food policy and any hurdles that are in the DC area. And the places where we like concentrating on is, number one is like the food deserts, right? Where the food isn't available. And not only is it not available, if it is available, it's expensive and there's no education there. And we deal with small businesses, we deal with sustainable agriculture and urban agriculture. So, and food waste is one of the big topics right now. I also, work with Food Rescue, which is a tech app, and it's volunteer-based, and it's pretty much if you have some spare time and you could pick a route and you can pick up some food at an establishment and go donate it to the next. I just stay involved, so.
Yeah, as you were telling me, kind of the Uber of food waste.
The Uber of food waste. Yeah.
It's got to be
The
the
Uber of everything these days, right?
Right. So yeah, you brought up a really cool and creative innovation that is helping people get involved with food waste in their communities. Brett, I think you'd mentioned some cool things that Kava is doing in all the levels of its supply chain in order to reduce food waste as it goes. Do you want to introduce a little bit about what Kava's actions are?
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. With food waste, there's kind of two broad components to it. There's the waste that you incur from the field to our restaurants before it's sold or prepped or cooked. And then there's food waste on the back end when you take food home, when you buy it, eat it, but maybe not finish it. I think the previous speaker spoke to that. So we really focus on the supply chain side where we have an internal tech team and a data science team where we're building algorithmic data algorithms to really manage the amount of food we're ordering and cooking based on our revenue curves. So we have a zero waste initiative that we're not quite there yet, but we're getting there, where the amount of food waste we have at the end of the night is very minimal. And then we use things like ugly produce sourcing. So we're a big buyer of ugly produce. Some fine dining restaurants have certain specs to the produce that they can use. When we're chopping and prepping and it's going into, say, your Super Greens blend, so if anybody's ever been to Cava and had Super Greens, one thing we use are broccoli stalks. So if you ever go to the grocery store and you see sections of broccoli crowns, or you buy full broccoli, take it home and cut the stalks and throw it in the trash, we take the broccoli stalks and shred them into our Super Greens blend, which happens to be the most nutritious part of the broccoli. So it's a win-win for everybody. But it's amazing the technology advances today that we can utilize to really mitigate the waste in the supply chain. We work with a shepherd down in on the North Carolina-Virginia border, a guy named Craig Rogers. He raises amazing lamb that's served at the James Beard House. And we worked with Craig for 3 years to really use our data insights and supply chain expertise to help mitigate the volatility of his inventory. And so as we grow, he can right size and grow his herd with us and really create a sustainable proposition for him, for us, as well as the environment.
Very neat. And yeah, I was actually going to mention the superfoods, which I now feel like I'm contributing to the health of the planet by eating at Cava. But what about what about kind of the future of like food waste industries or a food waste market? You were mentioning you kind of see a future where food waste is its own commodity. That makes me think of like roadkill restaurants where you might have like an all food waste restaurant opening up. But what are other ways it could look like, or other innovations getting?
Yeah.
My favorite place in town.
There's huge opportunities. Spike mentioned up to 40% of food that's produced for human consumption goes to waste, and of that, 85% goes into a landfill, and only about 14% gets recycled, and only 2% or less than 2% gets donated. So food donation is a huge opportunity to really mitigate food waste. I don't know if anybody here went to University of Maryland. Raise your hand. Anybody? All right, I'm a Terp, and I'll give a shout out. Some students there a few years ago created something called the Food Recovery Network. And that's since grown to 229 chapters across the country on college campuses, where they are taking all the excess food waste from dining halls every night and donating it to people in need. So there's huge opportunity there, and you as individuals can make a big impact, even though you think it's insignificant. If you get strawberries or raspberries and they're sitting in the refrigerator and the end of the container gets a little, it's a little marginal and they're not as fresh and you don't want to eat it, instead of throwing it in the trash can, you can throw it in the freezer, freeze it, and make it into a smoothie the next day. But all those small little pieces can make a huge outsized impact in the future. And then there's things like recycling, where we currently recycle fryer oil. A company called Valley Proteins picks up the tank out back and turns it into biofuel. And New York City, if anybody lives in New York City, you may be seeing a brown bin container, kind of like your blue recycling container, come to your front door. And if you live in a multi-unit apartment building, you should be asking your project management or building management to opt into this new program that New York City is launching right now for organic waste separation, that then goes to composting facilities, as well as potential digestion facilities and water filtration plants that they're retrofitting to turn into the methane gas that the previous speaker spoke about, that when it's in a landfill is actually harmful for the environment. Well, at the right kind of facility, that methane gas can be harnessed and converted into natural gas. So I think it's really encouraging to see the new technologies and processes that we're kind of at the forefront of being able to not only take this food waste, hopefully address food insecurity, but also take some of that waste and turn it into renewable sources of energy.
Great. And one more question before we get to the social questions. You addressed it a little, but as an individual millennial who's concerned about the planet, but is not going to go out dumpster diving or be a freegan anymore because I'm too old for that, what can I do that you would say, like, can you show me something that really does make a difference when it adds up?
Yeah, I mean, the first place you can start is your refrigerator. I mean, how often do people wind up not eating what's in the refrigerator and having to clean it out because they open the door and it smells and they have to throw it out? So it's actually creating an action plan. And there are smart apps now where you can track and it'll send you an alert when your food's about to expire, so it reminds you if something's stuck in the back. Again, small things can lead to big impact. And then the other thing is just advocate to your elected officials on greater composting programs. I mean, I look at composting today and it's kind of like recycling 25 years ago when it was a new thing. It wasn't so adopted, and now it's the norm. And that's where I believe composting can go. I mean, as restaurants, there's certain shopping centers that we're in where it's difficult. We're blocked from composting because of the waste service that's contracted on that shopping center doesn't compost and doesn't allow us to bring in our composting company. And then the economics, we had a facility in Howard County here that had to shut down because they weren't getting enough consistent material flow inbound to support it. So if you advocate to your elected officials, I don't know if anybody's read Steve Case's book, The Third Wave. It really advocates, So it advocates for innovation through public-private partnerships going forward. And I think this is an area that can really benefit from that, where good policy can create and incentivize the construct to really encourage composting. And then it also creates a foundation for it to be economically sustainable for the businesses and private businesses that are running compost facilities and creating the capacity that's necessary. Because right now it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem.
Right. And Spike, as an appointed official here in DC and running multiple restaurants, where do you think individuals can best have a place?
Well, I mean, I share a lot of Brett's sentiments, but especially where it comes to the point where you're not allowed to do something because of the facility. Those are like exactly what we thrive on at the Food Policy Councils. We want to hear from the public. These are open meetings. We want to hear about those problems, and those are the little things that we can fix to make a difference. But then as an individual, I mean, again, it's just open up your refrigerator. The more everyone realizes that there's a purpose for everything as far as food waste is concerned, talking about the stocks, they're a little bit more nutritious, the more you'll end up starting to have fun and a little bit more creative, right? Make it a game, like what can we create today out of the refrigerator without buying something or ordering something? What kind of meals can we produce? And just total awareness of the things that that we're conflicted with, which is food waste. Always living that way. So supporting the places that do well, like Kava, or making choices on where you eat specifically that share those same values that you have.
So being aware in your own life, voting with your dollar, and speaking to elected officials through forums like yours. Cool. Let's address some of the audience questions. I have one for Brett that is a good point on food packaging. Takeout and delivery is considered extremely bad for the environment due to the packaging. How is somewhere like Kava addressing that?
Yeah, so we use compostable materials, and the problem we face, the challenge we face is we have compost collection at our restaurants. Some of our restaurants, some shopping centers don't allow it, but if people take it out of our environment and take it home and throw it in the trash there, it's not getting segregated, it's not getting composted. So that's where, again, it's got to be a more holistic approach where municipalities are creating these compost programs. And then little things like as we try and mitigate people using bags to go things, it's these small things that can make a big impact. So taking bags out of the equation, is actually has a large impact.
Got it. And Spike, there's a good question. Why aren't more restaurants working with food waste, and how can we encourage restaurants in our local communities to do it?
Sure, I think there's just this thing that comes with food waste that restaurateurs, small business owners that are very busy running their businesses have a misconception that they'll be liable for donating foods or being part of it. So, breaking that kind of conversation up where, we were talking about the Bill Emerson Act, which was passed in 92, I think, or 98. I forget when it was actually, but it was just pretty much letting people know that you can donate your food and that you wouldn't be at risk for it. Many apps now that are like Copio, which is a food app, kind of like Uber, but it's not volunteer based. They pride themselves on this Emerson Act. So just being aware of what you can and not do, and just participating, and businesses should start off small, just like food rescue that we're doing with We the Pizza right now. All our leftover pizza, which there's a lot of leftover pizza at the end of the day or the end of the shift or the night, gets picked up and donated. So taking those small steps is what I would say. Was there a two-part question of that?
What can communities do to encourage, I think, restaurants to do more?
Well, I think, the food policy councils, for instance, as part of the community, come out, share your story, share information, and let us know. So,
Cool. Thank you both so much for talking about this. I think that will be available afterwards, but it looks like we are out of time based on the timer.
oh wow, that was quick.
So we've solved food waste now. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.